I woke up at 4:30 a.m. to the sound of heavy snowfall outside our bedroom window. The weatherman had warned about this blizzard, but seeing the thick blanket of white covering our driveway still surprised me. After 8 years of marriage to Sophia, I had grown accustomed to being the one who handled these morning chores. Our suburban Boston home looked beautiful in the snow, but I knew my commute to the construction site would be brutal if I did not clear the driveway now. As I put on my winter gear and headed outside with my shovel, the biting cold made me question my dedication. 40 minutes later, I needed a break and stepped inside for some hot coffee. That is when I saw it. Sophia had left her phone on the kitchen counter, still unlocked. A text notification popped up that would change everything. Before I tell you what I saw on that phone, let me know where you are watching from, and hit subscribe so you do not miss the next part of how I faced the biggest betrayal of my life. Our love story began like many others. I met Sophia during our junior year at Boston University. I was studying civil engineering while she pursued marketing. We clicked immediately over coffee at the campus library, bonding over our shared love for winter sports and classic movies. After graduation, we dated for 2 more years before I proposed during a weekend trip to Cape Cod. The wedding was small but perfect, with close friends and family, celebrating our union on a beautiful autumn day. Life seemed perfect at first. I secured a position at Northeastern Construction, a respected firm in Boston, while Sophia joined a marketing agency downtown. We saved diligently and purchased our 2-story home in the suburbs after 3 years of marriage. I worked hard, often putting in 60-hour weeks to ensure we had financial stability. Sophia decorated our house with care, creating a space that felt truly like home. We talked about having children someday, but agreed to establish our careers first. Around our 6th anniversary, things began to change. Subtle at first, the shifts in our relationship became impossible to ignore. Sophia started working later hours, often coming home well after 8 p.m. Our conversations grew shorter, more perfunctory. When I would ask about her day, she would give brief, disinterested responses before checking her phone or turning on the television. Physical intimacy became rare, then almost non-existent. She began dressing differently, paying more attention to her appearance in ways that seemed beyond normal professional requirements. I tried everything I could think of to rekindle what we had lost. I planned surprise date nights to restaurants we loved during our dating years. I bought thoughtful gifts that referenced our shared memories. For our 7th anniversary, I arranged a weekend getaway to the Vermont Lodge, where we had spent our first winter vacation together. Nothing seemed to work. Sophia would smile, politely participate minimally, but the connection remained broken. When I tried to discuss the distance between us, she would dismiss my concerns, blaming work, stress, or fatigue. By the time our 8th anniversary approached, I was desperate to save our marriage. I spent months planning a surprise trip to Hawaii, remembering how she had always talked about wanting to visit. The tickets were hidden in my desk drawer at work, waiting for the perfect moment to present them. I never got the chance. The night before that fateful morning, one of the worst blizzards in recent Boston history hit our area. The meteorologist on the evening news warned everyone to stay indoors if possible, predicting up to 20 inches of snow by morning. Schools had already announced closures, but as a project manager at a construction company, I knew I would still be expected on site. I woke up at 4:30 a.m., a full hour before my usual alarm. The world outside our window was transformed into a winter wonderland, but all I could see was the mountain of snow blocking our driveway. Sophia lay asleep beside me, undisturbed by the alarm or my movements as I slipped out of bed. She had come home particularly late the night, before claiming a client dinner had run long. I noticed the faint smell of unfamiliar cologne when she kissed my cheek, but pushed the thought aside. After putting on 3 layers of clothing, I trudged outside into the frigid morning. The temperature display on our porch read 8 degrees, and the wind made it feel much colder. The snow had drifted against our garage door, piling nearly 2 feet high in some spots. As I began shoveling, my muscles protested against the weight of the wet snow. Each scoop felt heavier than the last, and my fingers grew numb, despite my insulated gloves. 45 minutes into clearing the driveway, I had only managed to clear about half the space. Sweat dampened my innermost layer despite the cold, and my back ached from the repetitive motion of lifting and throwing snow. I decided to take a short break, heading inside for some hot coffee and a moment of warmth. The house was silent as I stamped the snow from my boots in the mudroom. I could hear Sophia still sleeping upstairs as I made my way to the kitchen. The coffee maker gurgled as I pressed the brew button, promising relief from the biting cold. While waiting, I removed my gloves and rubbed my hands together, trying to restore circulation to my frozen fingers. That was when I noticed Sophia had left her phone on the kitchen counter. This was unusual, as her phone was practically an extension of her hand. Even more unusual was that the screen was unlocked and active. I had never been the type to snoop through my wife's personal communications, respecting her privacy throughout our marriage. But as I moved to turn the phone over, a new notification appeared, briefly displaying the sender and preview text. The name was Jack, her marketing director at work. The words that followed stopped my heart. I picked up the phone, telling myself there must be some mistake or misunderstanding. But as the full conversation came into view, my world collapsed around me. The latest exchange was painfully clear. Sophia, he is out there like an idiot in the blizzard. If we are lucky, he will have a heart attack, and we will not need the divorce. Jack, keep thinking positive thoughts. Just a few more weeks, and we can stop pretending. Did you transfer the money yet, Sophia? Yes, another 5 kelvins yesterday. He never checks the joint account anyway. Too busy playing the devoted husband. My fingers felt numb, but not from the cold this time. I scrolled up through the conversation, each message driving the knife deeper. Their affair had been going on for at least 6 months, based on the timestamp of the earliest messages. They had met in hotel rooms, while Sophia claimed to be at client meetings. Jack had accompanied her on her last 2 business trips. And most chilling of all, they had discussed ways to ensure I would not contest the divorce they were planning, including suggestions about tampering with my food to create health problems. Screenshots of my personal financial information had been shared. Plans for their future together were laid out in detail, including which furniture from our home Sophia wanted to keep. They had even joked about how clueless I was, working overtime to provide for a wife who was plotting my downfall. I stood frozen in our kitchen, the coffee forgotten as the full weight of betrayal crashed down on me. 8 years of marriage, of shared dreams and sacrifices, reduced to contempt and conspiracy. The woman sleeping upstairs was a stranger who wished me harm. The life I thought we were building together was a carefully constructed lie. Despite the hurricane of emotions tearing through me, a strange calm settled over my external actions. I placed the phone exactly as I had found it, screen unlocked, and poured my coffee with steady hands. As the hot liquid warmed my body, my mind began calculating with cold precision. The initial shock gave way to a tactical clarity I had never experienced before. I returned to the driveway and finished clearing the snow, channeling my rage into each scoop of the shovel. The physical exertion helped stabilize my thoughts. By the time I had cleared a path for both our cars, I had decided not to confront Sophia immediately. Knowledge was power, and I needed to gather more before showing my hand. The drive to work was a blur of swirling snow and racing thoughts. I navigated the treacherous roads on autopilot, replaying the messages in my mind. Questions multiplied with each mile. How long had she truly been unhappy? Was any part of our marriage real? Did she actually contemplate harming me, or was that just dark humor between lovers? At the construction site, I went through the motions of checking progress and assigning tasks, but my focus was shattered. After an hour of pretending to review blueprints while actually staring blankly at the pages, I called my supervisor and requested a personal day, claiming stomach issues. He agreed readily, knowing my usual dedication. Instead of going home, I drove to a coffee shop across town and called the one person I knew could help, Anthony Parker. We had been friends since freshman year of college, and he had become one of the most sought-after divorce attorneys in Boston. The irony that I now needed his professional services was not lost on me. "It is bad, Tony," I said after ordering a black coffee. "I need advice, not as a friend but as a lawyer." Over the next hour, I detailed everything I had discovered. Anthony listened without interruption, his expression growing darker with each revelation. When I finished, he placed a hand on my shoulder. "First thing, do not confront her yet," he advised. "We need to document everything. Do you have access to your financial records?" That conversation set in motion a methodical investigation that would span the next 4 weeks. Anthony connected me with David Mercer, a private investigator who specialized in infidelity cases. While David tracked the physical movements of Sophia and Jack, I focused on our finances. What I discovered was even more devastating than the text messages. Sophia had been systematically draining our joint accounts for months, moving nearly $60,000 to a private account I knew nothing about. Credit card statements revealed purchases from luxury boutiques and weekend getaways that had never been mentioned to me. Hotel receipts forwarded from David confirmed the timeline of their affair had indeed begun 6 months ago, coinciding with Jack's promotion to marketing director. Further investigation revealed that Jack was not only Sophia's boss, but also married with 2 young children. His wife Margaret had no knowledge of the affair. The company they worked for had strict policies against relationships between managers and subordinates, making their affair not just a personal betrayal but a professional liability. Most disturbing were the additional text messages David recovered detailing specific instances where Sophia had deliberately added medication to my food when I complained about insomnia. These were not harmless sleeping pills, but prescription anxiety medication from her friend that had caused my unexplained stomach issues and drowsiness. The texts joked about increasing dosages to see if they could trigger more serious health problems. Armed with this information, Anthony helped me develop a comprehensive strategy. I moved most of our remaining joint funds into a separate account, leaving enough that Sophia would not immediately notice anything amiss. I secured all important documents including our marriage certificate, house deed, and investment information. I updated my will removing Sophia as beneficiary, and most importantly I maintained absolute normalcy at home. For 3 excruciating weeks I continued, as if nothing had changed. I kissed Sophia goodbye in the mornings, asked about her day in the evenings, and pretended not to notice when she received text messages that made her smile secretively. I feigned ignorance when she mentioned needing to work late or attend weekend conferences. I even prepared special dinners she barely touched before rushing out to meet her lover. Each moment was a performance that tore at my soul, but I knew premature confrontation would jeopardize everything. After a month of gathering evidence, Anthony confirmed we had everything needed for a favorable divorce settlement. The documentation of financial deception alone would ensure the court viewed her actions unfavorably, and the evidence of attempted drugging could potentially lead to criminal charges if I chose to pursue them. "How do you want to proceed?" Anthony asked during our final planning meeting. With dignity, I replied, but not mercy. I chose the Ocean View, the restaurant where we had celebrated our 5th anniversary, as the location for the confrontation. I made reservations for a Thursday evening, telling Sophia I wanted to discuss planning a summer vacation. She agreed with surprising enthusiasm, perhaps seeing an opportunity to push for the Hawaii trip I had already secretly booked. The restaurant was elegant, without being pretentious, with soft lighting and ocean views that had once seemed romantic. I arrived early, ensuring we had a private table in the corner. Sophia arrived 20 minutes late, looking stunning in a black dress I had never seen before. She apologized for her tardiness, blaming a last-minute client call. "You look beautiful," I said sincerely. Despite everything, the sight of her still stirred something in me, a painful reminder of what I had believed we shared. Dinner progressed with superficial conversation. I asked about her work projects, and she fabricated details about clients and campaigns, unaware that I knew exactly where and with whom she had spent her afternoon. She asked about my latest construction project, displaying more interest than she had in months. I wondered if she sensed something different in my demeanor. Midway through our entrees, her phone buzzed with an incoming message. She glanced at it discreetly, and I could see her fighting to control her expression. "Do you need to get that?" I asked politely. "It is just work," she replied, but her voice had an edge of tension. "Actually, would you mind if I step outside for a moment? The reception is better, and this might be important." "Of course," I said. "Take your time." As she hurried toward the restaurant entrance, I knew she was calling Jack. Perhaps he was concerned about her dinner with me, or they needed to coordinate some aspect of their plans. I waited until she was out of sight before removing a manila envelope from my jacket. When she returned 7 minutes later, she was slightly flushed and overly cheerful. "Sorry about that. Just a nervous client." Now, where were we? "I believe we were discussing the future," I said calmly, sliding the envelope across the table. "Please open it." Sophia looked confused but intrigued as she pulled out the contents. Her expression transformed from curiosity to shock to horror as she flipped through the pages. Color drained from her face as she saw the text message transcripts, bank statements, hotel receipts, and photos of her and Jack entering various hotels. The final page was a draft divorce petition citing adultery, financial fraud, and attempted harm. "What is this?" she whispered, though we both knew exactly what it was. "The truth," I replied simply. I know everything, Sophia. The affair, the stolen money, the plans for divorce. I even know about the medication you put in my food. She began with denial, as I expected. These messages are taken out of context. Jack is just a colleague. We were joking about the heart attack thing. $60,000 is a lot of money to transfer. As a joke, I countered. And the Ritz-Carlton charges too much for rooms to be used just for business meetings. Her strategy shifted to justification. Our marriage has been dead for years, Byron. You are always working. You stopped seeing me. Jack makes me feel alive again. I was working to build our future, I said, my voice steady despite the pain. The future you were planning to steal from me. The money you took was for our dream house fund. The overtime I worked was to save for the family we talked about starting. Tears began streaming down her face, but I had seen enough evidence of her deception to doubt their sincerity. What do you want? She asked finally. I have already filed for divorce, I said. Anthony Parker is my attorney. You may remember him from our wedding. Tony, your best friend. She looked genuinely surprised, another indication of how little attention she had paid to my life in recent years. That is not fair. I almost laughed at her concept of fairness. The papers include a proposed settlement that is more generous than what a court would likely award given the circumstances. You have 48 hours to sign, or I will be forced to pursue more aggressive options. What aggressive options? She demanded, anger, now replacing her shock. For starters, I have sent copies of all communications regarding your attempts to drug me to the district attorney, I said. They are deciding whether to pursue criminal charges. I have also documented the company policy violations involved in your relationship with Jack, which I will forward to your HR department unless the divorce proceeds smoothly. Her face contorted with rage. You would ruin my career. After 8 years together, you were willing to risk my life, I reminded her. The text where you suggested increasing my dosage to, and I quote, see if we can push him toward a cardiac episode, is particularly interesting to the authorities. Sophia collapsed back in her chair, the full implications of her actions finally sinking in. Jack will stand by me, she said, though her voice lacked conviction. Actually, I continued, I met with Margaret, Jack's wife, yesterday. Showed her everything. They have 2 children, correct. She was particularly disturbed by the hotel receipts charged to their family credit card. She is filing for divorce as well. The final blow came as I stood to leave. I have also provided Jack's employers with documentation of your relationship and the multiple instances where company travel funds were misused for your rendezvous. I believe his termination will be finalized by tomorrow morning. Sophia grabbed my arm as I turned to go. Byron, please. We can work this out. I made a terrible mistake. I do love you. I gently removed her hand. The divorce papers are fair. You get to keep your car and personal possessions. The house will be sold and proceeds split after the $60,000 you took is returned to me. Your deadline is Saturday at noon. I left her sitting alone at the table staring at the evidence of her betrayal. The restaurant bill had been paid in advance, a final courtesy that stood in stark contrast to her actions. As I walked to my car, a weight lifted from my shoulders. The confrontation had gone exactly as planned, yet I felt no triumph, only the solemn satisfaction of having defended my dignity. The fallout from that dinner was swift and comprehensive. Jack was indeed fired the following morning for violating company ethics policies. His termination was the least of his problems, as Margaret had already hired her own attorney and restricted his access to their children. Within days, Sophia learned that Jack had blocked her number and was attempting to reconcile with his wife, who was surprisingly receptive given the financial implications of a divorce with 2 young children involved. Sophia's professional reputation crumbled as quickly as her personal life. While I never directly informed her colleagues about the affair, the sudden termination of the marketing director and her obvious emotional distress led to inevitable office speculation. Her position became untenable when her supervisor discovered she had attributed hours to client projects when she was actually meeting Jack. Though not technically fired, she was placed on administrative leave and eventually negotiated a resignation that allowed her to avoid a formal termination on her record. She signed the divorce papers on Friday, a day before my deadline. Anthony handled the exchange, sparing me another confrontation. The divorce was finalized with remarkable speed, given the circumstances, with the judge approving our settlement without requiring a formal hearing. The house sold within a month in the hot Boston real estate market, and after returning the money she had diverted, Sophia received her share of our assets as agreed. During this period, I focused entirely on rebuilding my life. I rented a comfortable apartment closer to downtown, reducing my commute and giving me more personal time. I accepted a promotion at work that I had previously declined, believing it would take too much time away from my marriage. The irony was painful but clarifying. Anthony and his wife Jessica became my support system, inviting me for weekly dinners and introducing me to their circle of friends. Through them, I began socializing again, though I made it clear I was not ready for dating. My parents, who had always had reservations about Sophia, flew in from Arizona to spend 2 weeks helping me settle into my new place. Their presence was healing in ways I had not anticipated. 6 months after our divorce was finalized, Sophia reached out via email. She had moved to Chicago for a fresh start and asked if we could talk. Against Anthony's advice, I agreed to a phone call. Her voice sounded smaller, more hesitant than I remembered. "I have been in therapy," she began, "trying to understand why I did what I did. I want you to know how deeply I regret everything." I listened as she explained her journey toward self-awareness. The affair with Jack had been less about love and more about validation and escape. She had felt inadequate in her career, overshadowed by my steady progress in mine. Rather than communicate these feelings, she had sought external validation and convinced herself that our marriage was the problem. "The things I said in those messages," she continued, her voice breaking, "about wishing you harm. I never actually wanted that. It was this toxic persona I created trying to impress Jack with my commitment to our relationship. It sounds insane now, but at the time it felt like proving my loyalty to him." "Did you actually put medication in my food?" I asked, needing to know this specific truth. She was silent for a moment. "Yes," she finally admitted, "twice. Anxiety medication that made you drowsy. I told myself it was to help you sleep because you seemed so stressed. But I know that was a lie," I told myself. I was testing boundaries, seeing what I could get away with. I will never forgive myself for that. The conversation continued for nearly an hour. I did not offer forgiveness, but I did thank her for her honesty. When she asked if reconciliation was ever possible, I was gentle but firm in my refusal. Some betrayals cannot be undone, regardless of remorse. A year after discovering those text messages, I had dinner with Anthony and Jessica to mark the anniversary of what I now called my Independence Day. During the meal, Jessica mentioned that her colleague Sarah would be joining us for dessert. I almost declined to stay, not interested in an obvious setup, but politeness won out. Sarah arrived as we were finishing our main course. A kindergarten teacher with a quick laugh and thoughtful eyes, she had none of Sophia's polished glamour, but possessed a warmth that was immediately appealing. When she mentioned growing up in a small town in western Massachusetts, I found myself genuinely curious rather than merely polite. We exchanged numbers that night, and I called her 2 days later to invite her for coffee. Our first official date was to a local bookstore, followed by dinner at a casual neighborhood restaurant. There was no pretense, no games, just two people enjoying each other's company. After dinner, she mentioned an upcoming school fundraiser and asked if I might be interested in helping build simple bookcases for a classroom library project. The following weekend, I found myself in her classroom surrounded by wood tools and her infectious enthusiasm for creating learning spaces. As we worked side by side, I realized I was smiling more than I had in years. The relationship progressed naturally from there based on mutual respect and open communication, two elements I now recognized as non-negotiable. Sarah had her own history of relationship disappointments, including a broken engagement 2 years prior. We shared our stories openly, neither of us pretending to be without scars. The honesty between us was refreshing after years of mounting deception in my marriage. When I eventually told Sarah the full story of my divorce, her response solidified my growing feelings for her. Instead of empty platitudes or forced optimism, she simply held my hand and said, "That experience shaped you, but it does not define you. I am interested in who you are becoming, not just what you survived." 18 months after that snowy morning when I discovered Sophia's betrayal, I stood in my new home, a renovated colonial with a spacious yard in a quieter suburb. Sarah had helped me select it, though we maintained separate residences, both agreeing that rushing into cohabitation would be unwise. Still, she had her own key, and many of her books and plants had found their way onto my shelves and windowsills. The life I had now was not the one I had planned, but in many ways it was richer and more authentic. The betrayal that once threatened to destroy me had instead forced me to rebuild on a stronger foundation. I had learned painful but necessary lessons about trust, self-worth, and resilience. Most importantly, I had discovered that sometimes the harshest winters clear the path for the most vibrant springs. As I stood on my porch watching the first snow of a new winter, I realized that not all closed doors represent losses. Sometimes they are protections guiding us away from paths that would have led to deeper pain. The morning I found Sophia's phone was both an ending and a beginning, the dividing line between a life built on illusions and one grounded in truth. Let me know in the comments if you have ever experienced a betrayal that ultimately led you to a better place. Do not forget to like and subscribe for more stories about overcoming life's toughest challenges, and share this video with someone who might need to hear that sometimes the coldest blizzards bring the clearest new beginnings. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, your next chapter might be your best one yet.